All right, let's jump right into a fascinating historical detective story. We're looking at a mystery that's thousands of years old, and the biggest clue isn't some buried artifact, it's the very structure of an ancient text. We're talking about cracking the code of when the book of Deuteronomy was actually written.
So here's the big question. When was this book, a text that has shaped law, ethics, and religion for millennia, really put to paper? Now, this isn't some new debate. Scholars have been going back and forth on this for over 100 years, and it's a real clash of evidence and theories.
Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. And for Deuteronomy, a major clue popped up when scholars started comparing it to ancient legal documents, specifically international treaties from the ancient world.
So it turns out there were basically two main blueprints for treaties back then. You had the earlier Hittite treaties from around the 14th to 13th centuries BC, and then the much later Assyrian and Aramaic treaties. And while they have a lot in common, there's one massive difference: that historical prologue. The old ones have it, the newer ones don't. And that one little structural detail, well, it became the key to this whole mystery.
This single clue about structure is what led a scholar named Meredith Kline to propose a pretty radical hypothesis, one that suggested the book was way, way older than a lot of people thought. So here was Kline's aha moment. He looked at Deuteronomy and realized its structure, with its big historical introduction, was a dead ringer for that older Hittite treaty format. So he argued, if it's built like a document from the 13th century BC, well, maybe it was written in the 13th century BC, right back in the time of Moses. And Kline himself makes a brilliant point here. He basically asks, if this book was written 600 years after Moses, why would the author be so obsessed with the transfer of power to his successor, Joshua? It's a huge deal if you're there at the nation's founding, but for an author centuries later, as Kline says, it's quite inexplicable. It just doesn't make sense. But, of course, no good mystery is ever that simple, right? Enter another scholar, J.A. Thompson. He stepped into the ring with some serious reservations, ready to challenge this whole neat and tidy conclusion. Okay, so Thompson basically had two main problems with Kline's theory. First, he said, what if that treaty structure wasn't original? Maybe a later editor just slapped it on top of older material. And second, he argued that the historical prologue itself, Kline's key piece of evidence, wasn't the reliable dating tool everyone thought it was. All right, so now it's time to put on our detective hats. Let's put Thompson's claims under the microscope and really cross-examine the evidence to see if it holds up. This was Thompson's biggest bombshell. He claimed he'd found a late 7th century treaty that did have a historical prologue. Now, if that's true, it basically blows Kline's entire argument out of the water, because it means prologues weren't just an early feature. But when other experts took a look at the very same text, the story got a lot murkier. Scholar E.F. Campbell pointed out that the artifact is in really bad shape, it's very fragmentary, and the writing is far from clear. Not exactly a smoking gun, is it? And it didn't stop there. Another giant in the field, K.A. Kitchen, took a look and dismissed it too. He argued that what Thompson was calling a full-blown prologue wasn't that at all. It was just a single passing historical illusion, totally different from the detailed, structured intros we see in the early treaties and in Deuteronomy. So the verdict on this point? It seems pretty clear. Thompson's key piece of counter-evidence is shaky at best. It's disputed, it's fragmentary, and it probably isn't even what he claimed it was. That means the fundamental distinction, early treaties have prologues, late ones don't, that still holds. But Thompson wasn't done yet. He had another angle of attack, this one zeroing in on a single phrase, beyond the Jordan. He argued this phrase proves the author was already inside Canaan, looking back east, which would mean it had to be written long after Moses, who never made it into the land. But here's the thing. When you actually look at how Deuteronomy itself uses that exact Hebrew phrase, the argument just kind of falls apart. In chapter 1, it refers to the eastern side of the river. But then just 2 chapters later, the same exact phrase is used to talk about the western side. So what does that tell us? The phrase is just ambiguous. Its meaning totally depends on where the speaker is standing. It's like me saying across the street. It's not a fixed point. It certainly can't be used as knockout evidence for a later author. So after all that back and forth, where does our investigation land? After weighing all the arguments, what can we really say today about the age of this ancient text?
Look, Thompson's challenges were important. They forced everyone to double-check the evidence and sharpen their arguments. But at the end of the day, his objections just don't seem to hold up. And that core piece of evidence for an early date, that unmistakable treaty structure, it remains remarkably strong.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The scholar K.A. Kitchen, he doesn't mince words on this. He calls the structural link between Deuteronomy and those early treaties crystal clear evidence for a text coming from around 1200 BC at the latest. That's about as definitive as it gets in this field. So the big takeaway is this. This treaty analogy is an incredibly powerful, forceful argument that the book's origins lie way back in the 2nd millennium BC. And that really matters, because it helps anchor one of Western civilization's foundational texts in the actual historical world it describes. And all this leaves us with one last really cool thought. This whole case didn't hinge on what was written, but on how it was written, its structure. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other ancient secrets are just sitting there, hidden in plain sight, not in the words themselves, but in their very framework?